Hello and welcome back to another episode of FTB Interactions. Last episode we upgraded our power generation. We also added more blast furnaces, which I have since moved around a little bit more. So I swapped our titanium one, which used to sit on the right hand side, and I've wall sheared that with the one making Enderium. And then the stainless steel and regular steel ingots are on the cupronickel ones. And then these four again are for tungsten steel, vibrant alloy, energetic alloy, and tungsten ingots. I've also just cleaned up this roof area a bit more, just to try and see how I would want to lay the roof on. I think this works pretty well. I have also been gathering some more endstone to run through our infernal deconglomerator, because as you can see we are actually out of platinum dust. So this isn't very ideal for making platinum, but it's the only source we've got for now. We will be investing in a better platinum production in the future though. I also added this trash can here for fluid overflow. Specifically I have it for mineral resin and methane. And the way I'm doing this is I have a fluid storage bus on here set to a lower priority, and I've filtered it for the fluids that I want to overflow trash. Basically I noticed that this fluid interface was filling up with the mineral resin and it was blocking the chlorine from coming here. So that seems to have cleaned up this blockage. And as I mentioned last time, I did also go ahead and set up our tungstate processing. So this is an EV recipe. This requires hydrogen and tungstate, which we're getting from the infernal deconglomerator from endstone. And the dust from this goes into this interface here where it gets sent to that blast furnace on the end. And these two chemical reactors are just to boost our production of nitrogen and also hydrogen. These just get sent into our fluid interface here, into our system. As I noticed, well, for one, we weren't producing any sources of nitrogen, and our hydrogen was a little bit slow. The other one we had was at HV, and I think that's sitting over there next to our fuel production. And the last thing I've changed is these fluid solidifiers for glass, rubber bars, and epoxy. Before, these used to be controlled by level emitters, and I was putting the input into our system. But I've changed it out for storage buses, and this way it accesses the internal buffer of the machine. So we're only going to be storing 64 glass, but it means that if our system ever goes out, we don't burn through all of the sand or, the rubber and sulfur in this case. So it's just a little bit cleaner, a little bit more safe to have the storage buses on here. And we don't need to keep a lot of these things buffered, because at the moment we are actually out of sulfur. We do have to set up some DML for this, which is something we may get to today. But first of all, I'd like to automate all the tiers of circuits. As you can see, we are actually running low on some of the circuits. Some tier 1s we're kind of running low on. We have 84 left, which might seem like a lot, but for ore processing we're going to need a lot of different machines. And I would like to have these things on autocraft. So I think we'll just start with the tier 1s and then work our way up to the tier 4s that we have access to. A lot of them share the same components, so once we do one, it'll be easy to add the other ones. So for a start, these have to be done in the assembling machine, obviously, with molten tin, but we already have this step done. So that just leaves the components. So plastic circuit boards, I would like to have passively produced. And there's a few different recipes for these. I would like to just use the polytetrafluoroethylene, as this gives four boards per sheet of Teflon. And this, I think, is the same for all of the different versions of the circuit boards, which we may as well also automate at the same time, as it's more or less the same. This does require actually a decent amount of sulfuric acid, which is made from sulfur. So we may in the end actually end up doing DML today, I don't know, we'll see. But let's start with all of the different circuit boards here. Alright, so I started setting this up. There's actually quite a few more steps in this than I first anticipated, but it's worth doing, I think, and we're going to go through it one by one. So the way I have this set up is I have two bending machines. We're doing this all at HV, by the way. Two bending machines, one to turn ingots into copper plates, and the other one is to turn plates into copper foil. Those foils are then round robined into these three chemical reactors, where we have sulfuric acid being inputted from this fluid interface. And then in this one we have the Teflon sheets, which make our plastic boards. And in this one we have epoxy resin sheets, which we're making over here in this fluid solidifier. Those get put in here, so that is the epoxy and the plastic for the tier 1 and 2 circuits. The tier 3 is made from the fibre reinforced epoxy resin sheets, which have to be made from raw carbon fibres as well as epoxy resin. So we will also need a chemical bath for this. So I think we'll put the chemical bath right here, and that way we can insert with fluids and items on the top. This will need some filters though. Alright, so I filtered that for the carbon fibers and our epoxy resin, which I've also added to our two interfaces. We are not yet producing carbon fibers automatically. I don't quite know what we're going to do about that, but I think that's something we'll set up elsewhere, and we'll come back to that. But for now, this imports the fiber reinforced epoxy resin sheets to give us our circuit boards right here. And I think what I'm going to do here is similar to what I done over there, and just put, and also here, and just use storage buses to access our items, since we don't need to buffer a huge amount of these things. So we can storage bus on each one and set this to extract only. I don't actually think the extract only matters, but we do it anyway. So yeah, as you can see now, we are now getting our circuit boards in the system, and I think we can call those automated, besides the carbon fibers, but I'm going to come back to those. Also, just ignore this chest. This is from the copper foil I already had in my system. It's just going to use this before it makes any more copper, because I am actually quite low on copper ingots. We do have to get ore processing sooner rather than later. But next, to be able to craft our tier 1s, we need all 3 SMDs. This is made in the polyethylene assembler, which we already actually have. I just have to add recipes for like the wires, the carbon we have. We have polyvinyl chloride, but we don't have the thin sheets or the aluminium foil. And I think, unlike an Omnifactory, I'm just going to do this on demand as we need it. So since we can actually use better recipes later on, I'm just going to add processing patterns for each of these SMDs. Like so. And these will go into our polyethylene assembler. Okay, so all the recipes are added. We can now request one of each of the SMDs. Well, more than one, but you know what I mean. All the SMDs are on our autocraft now. And so the last component is our CPU wafers. So for the tier 1s, we need the central processors, which take the laser engraver. And we will have to make a few more of these, since these take different lenses, and we cannot insert or extract lenses from GregTech machines. So at the moment, we have one with the Skystone lens. This handles all of the 82 crafts. But let's add, I think it's 3 more that we need for the different lenses. So there's 2 more laser engravers. So actually the question is, where do we want to put these machines? It's not very efficient if we just keep expanding this way, because we're going to end up really wide. We do also have to consider channels. Things are getting a little bit cramped over there, and it's going to end up the same way here. We could actually stack them, so I think probably stacking them is going to be the best option long term. Alright, so I've added space up the top for another row of machines, and I think this is how we're going to be doing it. I decided to put a little overhang on this just to keep it a bit more interesting rather than it being flat. So I think this will work for expansion of machines. So now all we have to do is set this one up the same as we did for all the others. And we'll also set our recipe for the laser engraver. We actually don't yet have any wafers automated. These are made from monocrystalline silicon boules in the blast furnace. And there's various different tiers of this. We have the regular one, which is just gallium and silicon. Or you can have glowstone doped or Naquada doped eventually, but we don't have access to this yet. But for now, I'm just going to rely on my backlog of wafers that we have from various quest rewards, as well as some batch crafting I've done. So the one we're after is the CPU wafer, and then after the laser engraver step, we have to cut and saw it, but we already have a cut and saw, so we just need a recipe for that. And I think that also means that we have the rest of the materials for the tier 1 circuits, which means we can just add a recipe for it, and this will go into our tin assembler. So now we can request, I don't know, 30 circuits. Oh, it looks like I forgot the fine wire. That's easy enough to add in the wire mill. So now can we request like 30 circuits? Oh yeah, we can. Nice. So let's move on and do the tier 2 circuits, which take many of the same materials. It's just that it takes fine red alloy wire and the plastic boards. So that should mean we can actually just add a recipe for that, like so. And this will also go into our tin assembler. So now let's try request 20 of these things. And nice, they seem to be crafting. So that's tier 1 and 2s. The tier 3s are a little bit more complicated. Actually, no, they're not. We already have the epoxy boards. Tier 3s will be easy as well. Although there is the nano CPUs. Yeah, I forgot about this step, so we'll have to add this step first. Alright, so that is nano CPUs all set up. I did actually go back and do the carbon fibers. The reason I skipped over it is because we don't have a reliable source of platinum. So I've just manually input this, but I have set all the filters so that when we get platinum, we can add it to our fluid extractors over there, and this will be able to keep running. So just to show you, this will make our carbon fibers. They will get put in this chest, and I have a storage bus under here with extract only. And then we're also asking for carbon fibers in here, for these two steps, and this makes our CPU wafers, or the nano CPUs, by mixing energized glowstone and the CPU wafers. And that is on limited item filler here, and that gives us our nano CPUs, which we then have to cut down. I'm going to do this step on demand, but I think I'll also just stick a storage bus on here since we don't need to buffer that much of this wafer, and we'll later process it down to our qubits for the EV circuits. Alright, so there's the recipe for the nano CPU cutting step, and we have also run out of space in the cutting machine, so another expansion card. I love these things now. I had to add it to the wire mill earlier on, and here for more wires. And with that we can add our tier 3 circuit recipe in. Let's test this one out. Let's ask for, I don't know, 30. Yep, that seems to be crafting. Nice, so what about the tier 4 circuits then? So these are going to take the qubit CPUs, and the rest of the components we've already got on autocraft or on passive. So for the qubits, it does take the nanos, which we just made, but it also takes the improved ender eyes and also gallium arsenide. We are producing radon. I don't think we're making eyes of ender yet, which will just be an assembler recipe, but again, we do have blaze powder, so that comes back to DML, but we'll get to that in a second. I think I'll just add a chemical bath for this improved ender eye. Alright, so we got our chemical bath with the named interface on here. This is receiving radon from the fluid interface behind it, with a LV pump on there just to insert it. And while we're here, we may as well add the nether star recipe for the improved nether stars, as both of these can be done in the HV chemical bath. And then obviously we'll add the ender eye one also. And then we have to somehow get gallium arsenide. And the way we're going to do that is by mixing arsenic dust and gallium. This gives us our gallium arsenide dust. That then gets all imported into this new blast furnace here next to our other two copper nickel ones, where it will cook from the dust into the ingot, and then it gets imported into this fluid extractor next to the mixer that mixes the dust, and this will give us our liquid. The liquid is exposed to the system via a fluid storage bus, and so is the dust. It's just got a regular storage bus on here, just so that we buffer only a stack in our system. And then to craft the qubit CPUs, I've added this EV chemical reactor with an interface with a pattern for the qubit wafers. And this will mix our improved ender eyes, the gallium arsenide dust, which we just fluid solidified, and nano CPUs, which we're making like this, in I think this chemical reactor right here. And this I'm powering with a flux point, just so that we can have the higher throughput on the EV machines. The fluid is being supplied by a fluid interface with a LV pump on the side. And then input is just from the bottom, and output is set to auto output on the machine. So yeah, that now means we can request quantum processors at EV tier, I think. I haven't actually tried this yet. Oh yeah, we can. It's just a little bit slow, but it's definitely working. It's automated, which is what matters. And so with that means that we have all the components automated for the tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4 circuits, as well as all the boards. And yeah, but I think it's time that we took a break from circuits and we move on to ore processing. And the reason we need ore processing is if we just take a quick stock of our items here, if we look at something like copper, we have 350 copper ingots and 500 dust, which is absolutely nothing. Our iron is in a similar state of, yeah, I mean, we have like 0 iron. 500 might seem like a lot. I mean, it is for the start of the game, but at this point, ideally we want to be in the thousands. Stainless steel is actually in a decent spot, but I believe we don't have any more manganese dust to make stainless. Gold is even worse actually, we only have 230 dust, and we have like 0 lead. Silver is, yeah, similar, so we really need to process the ores that we're getting. Our current ore processing is this universal macerator at HV, and I've just been dumping a whole lot of stuff in here whenever I need it. For example, right now we're doing cobaltite, which we can get the arsenic dust that we need for our gallium arsenide. So I've just been throwing that in here manually and then electrolyzing it. We should have some arsenic dust in here. Yeah. But yeah, the next project is definitely going to be ore processing. We will have to find somewhere to put that though. I've actually been thinking of a couple of different places. Oh yeah, I also changed up this slightly. I think this looks a little bit better than the way I had it before. But as for the ore processing, we could actually put it in this little space here. We don't need that much space, and I think with the design I have in mind, we're going to be stacking it vertically. Let me actually just have a little think about this, gather some materials, and then we'll get started on our ore processing. Okay, so I think we actually will end up putting our processing in this little space here. I didn't yet put a roof or the walls or anything since I don't know how big exactly this is going to end up. And since we're doing ore processing at EV tier, I think now is as good a time as any to pick up this quest, especially for the rewards in this. So we have to make 40 motors, some pumps, conveyors, all the components at EV tier. And to make these, it actually takes a lot of annealed copper. These are 8x wires per motor, and we need 4 of them. So I'm going to add an arc furnace here for on-demand crafting of annealed copper. More or less exactly the same setup with a fluid interface and a pump on the side. So now this will get oxygen, and all we have to do this is supply this with copper on demand. So we're going to be using this recipe here, oxygen plus copper. It's very, very fast in this furnace, so I don't mind doing this on demand. And then all we need is a recipe for some of the wires. Alright, so I just ordered the 40 motors up. We are still lacking some neodymium, but hopefully that should be fixed once we get this system up and running. Alright, and our motors have just finished. We just need the conveyor. There it is, and the quest. Awesome. This gives us a bunch of neodymium that we can use for our machines. As well as some annealed copper. All of this stuff is useful, to be honest. Alright, so if we come over to our orbital miner here on the space station, this is where the majority of the ores are going to be coming from. So we have to actually split this up and think about how we want to process this, as not everything is going to be processed in the same way. So for example, these crystal blocks each give a different byproduct resource. All of them give their own shards plus a chance output, and in this case it's cadmium. In the case of the blue crystal, it's neodymium, and the blue crystals, or all of these crystal shards, are used for the actually additions components, for in this case it's payless. And all of these just have one option, which is just to pulverize. So all of these have to go into a pulverizer. As for the dense ores though, there is actually more than one way we want to process these. So all of the ingot resources, so tin, silver, copper, gold, lead, and iron, I think we're going to be processing all the same way. There is a few different options in this pack, specific to this pack. Like there is this chemical reactor shard, which allows you to actually 64x from one dense ore. But I think since we get so many of these ingot ores, I don't think it's worth going through all the processing for that. I think we're going to 64x just the specialized ore, like platinum and iridium. Things that we don't get in large quantities, but we need in large quantities. But as for these ingot ores, we're going to first of all smelt them into iron clusters. And then there's only one option, which is to pulverize into crushed ore. And then from here, there is a few different options. We can either ore wash, we can pulverize again, or we can forge hammer. The forge hammer, we're definitely not doing this way. But we can either thermal centrifuge or we can ore wash. So I think the next step is going to be for us to ore wash this. This is going to give us a bunch of tiny dust, which we'll have to filter, as well as stone. I think the stone dust we're just going to be trashing. But yeah, there's multiple different filter steps in each stage of the processing. We just have to keep that in mind. But after we ore wash, we get purified ore. And from here we have to pulverize once again. This gives us purified plus a byproduct. And then from here we can either smelt or centrifuge. The centrifuge gives us a byproduct, whereas smelting just gives the ingot. I'm not sure what we're going to do with this end step yet, but we'll get to that when we get there. As for the dense ores, the first step is always the same. It's just going to be smelting into clusters and then pulverizing once again. And actually the third step is also going to be the same, which we're going to ore wash. However, after the ore washing step, we get this extra sifter step, which gives us some flawless and exquisite gems. And some of the higher tier materials actually require us to have exquisite or flawless in some of these crafting recipes. So we want to do the sifter step for emerald and diamond. And then after this, it just gives us the purified, which we get from the same as the iron, but this time it doesn't give us a smelting option. We have to centrifuge it. And then we also get these byproducts, which we'll deal with when we get to there. It's not actually as simple as it first may seem. So we may not actually get it finished today, but let's just dive right into this then, shall we? So we first of all have to transport these items back to our base, and I think the easiest way to do that is just to ender chest them. I hope I have enough, to be honest, the ender chests. Okay, so apparently I only have one of these things, and we get some of these from the quest rewards, but I honestly can't tell you where they went. I know that we're using 2 for our clay, And by the way, the crafting recipe for these, we can't quite make this yet. We haven't unlocked void metal. So we are using them for clay here, but as you can see, our clay is completely backed up. We do not need to process any more clay. So when we unlock void metal, I'll replace this ender chest, but I think I'm going to use this one for our ores. Okay, so I've put down our ender chest after the caches, and the way we're going to do this is we're going to send back these 6 crystal blocks, as well as all the ores, and the rest we'll send back in a different way. I think we'll just do a separate ender chest for that, and filter them later on. Because things like skystone, we will want to process, but it's not going to go through our ore processing. And same as glowstone, we just want to store this as is. So we'll come back to these and deal with them later. But for now we have a chest full of ores, and now we have to process these on the other side. Okay, so this is always the trickiest part, but especially going to be designing this layout. But I think we'll start with the crystal blocks, which have to be pulverized. So I don't know how many pulverizers we're going to need, to be honest, but I want to build it in a way that we can easily add more. So I have these on autocraft by now. I think I'll start with 10. Apparently we're short diamonds. That's not good. So I think we'll filter these items out to the left for the crystals and right for the ores. And then we'll split it 2 ways, one for the gems and one for the ingots. Okay, so I've filtered the extract of our ender chest here for each of the 6 crystal blocks. I've also plugged in these 2 pulverizers. These are plugged in via CEF with a flux point on the side. Yeah, down there. So let's put in a few manually, just to see how this is going to work. Alright, so we are getting our crystal shards. And these shards we have to package, or we can just shapeless craft. So I'm thinking that we actually just use 2 crafters here. Okay, so I think I got all the recipes set, or most of the recipes set. I'm just waiting on some more of the crystal shards. But this basically compresses them all down into their crystal versions, and then puts them in this ME subnet. And for now we just have the 164K ME storage drive in there. So this holds all of the byproducts. The dusts, by the way, are in this one. So this converts the chrome, indium, gallium, neodymium and yttrium. I think there might be one more as well, but yeah, it's kind of getting locked on the one colour. I'll eventually get through them all, and I'll be able to set those recipes. But yeah, we're just using item conduits for this. I think I may have to put in some extract speed upgrades. Possibly. Well, maybe not. It seems to be keeping up. And yeah, if we need to add more pulverizers, we can just stack it vertically. Alright, so now that just leaves all of these ores, which is actually the hardest part. I think we'll start with the ingot ores first, the copper and iron and silver. But before we split, we have to actually put it all into a multi-smelter. So I've crafted another one. Our other one is still over there. I think we're going to put that in use, or set it up somewhere for on-demand smelting. But we'll have a dedicated one just for our ores here. So this one we're going to filter out all of the ores. We will extract this on brown. I guess it doesn't actually matter. Got our multi-smelter at nichrome coils. And for the multi-smelter, it actually does matter which coils you use. It will smelt anything, unlike the blast furnace, no matter the tier of coil, but it does give a energy discount plus a speed boost. So for our nichrome coils here, we have a energy discount of 1x and a level 4 speed. If it turns out this isn't fast enough, then we'll upgrade the coils. It's just that I already had these coil blocks as one of the quest rewards, so we're going to use them for now just to get this up and running. And then all of these have to go into more pulverizers. So I think we'll start our pulverizers about here. We'll have them in this sort of a shape. We'll run cable up the middle to power them. And for now, I think we'll just start with the 4 and then upgrade the machines as we go. So to make this a bit neater, I may do this underneath, and we can just facade this eventually. So I hooked up some power to get these going, as well as the conduits, and this is the point where we want to split the ores. So I think that to make that a bit easier, we're going to put it inside a buffer chest. There, and then from here we will use filters. And I'm thinking we use the GregTech filters for this, similar to what I done in Omnifactory. So actually I should have probably made this a GregTech chest. Actually, yeah. Let's switch off the output right now and swap this over to a GregTech chest. Actually no, this isn't the step we want to split these. We want to ore wash first. And this is by far the slowest step. This is 20 seconds. This is LV though, but so it will be a bit faster, but this is definitely the slowest step of them all. To give us a little bit more of a speed boost, we can use distilled water. So I think it may be worth actually just setting up some distilleries for distilled water. Even though I think it is worth using distilled water, I'm just going to use regular water for right now, and we can easily add it later on. I'm going to build it in a way that it's easy to add. So right now we just have an aqueous accumulator producing us water, which goes into our fluid interface for our main ME system. And I've partitioned a drive there. Right now I'm just hooking up a P2P connection to hook over to our ore processing system. And this will let us put a storage bus on all of those tiny dusts from the crystal shards, as well as be able to supply water via a fluid interface for all of the ore washers. So I think the ME system was over here. This should be our interface right about here, yeah. So if we look in our mainnet terminal, we have 96 cadmium, which does match up with the subnet. So we can see all of our items from this little subnet here. And I've also extended the line over to our ore washers, which I placed on the left-hand side here. The items that we want to wash are going to go from this crate into these ore washers. And actually, I was having a look at some of these items. I don't think we're going to be washing every single item, as it's just not necessary, and these ore washers are pretty slow. So we will hook up a interface right here for water, and then just insert with some fluid conduits. So slight change of plan here. I think I want to be able to set the system up to be able to throw any ore in here, rather than just the ores that come out from our Orbital Miner. Because obviously the Orbital Miner doesn't produce every single ore, and there is other ores that we won't be 64x, but I would still like to get the byproducts from. So I think in the end we actually will wash all of the ores. It does mean that we'll have to have quite a lot of ore washers though, but I'm going to recenter these so that it's a little bit more even down the center. Okay, so I moved over the ore washers. We're now inserting everything from this bronze crate, i.e. all of the crushed ore. That's all getting washed and then output to this modular storage. And in here we get 3 different types of output. We get tiny dusts of various different materials, stone dust, and purified dust. So now we need a way to further process these. The stone dust, as I mentioned, we're going to be just throwing out. So actually we can just start with that. That's the easiest step. Alright, so I hooked up a trash can with a filter for stone dust. So that will take all the stone dust out of this modular storage. And then that just leaves the tiny dust and the purified. So to filter that out, we're going to use the GregTech filters. And these are GregTech chests, so we can put filters on the side of these ones. These are ore dictionary filters, so we have to hit this with the screwdriver. And in the first one, we're going to say dust tiny wildcard. This will put any dust that match the ore dictionary tag on here. So you can see under the tooltip for the tiny dusts on the 5th line. This will match any dust tiny, which will be inserted into here. So all we have to do is set the insert on this. And from here, we're going to put them in packagers and then just store them as the dusts. And then purified, we want the ore dictionary for this is crushed purified. And I believe capitals do matter. So if you do this, make sure you type it in exactly like this. And then the asterisk is for wildcard, which means it'll match any crushed purified ore. Again, insert on brown, and all the purified should get put in here. Next, we want to deal with the purified, which we want to further pulverize. And this is the step also where we want to sift the diamonds. So I don't know what the best way is to filter these out. I think maybe just an item conduit blacklist on here. So maybe we'll do it off 2 ways. This side will be pulverize and this side will be sifter. Alright, so we got the 4 sifting machines and 4 pulverizers. Again, this is for blacklist on purified emerald and purified diamond. And again, we can just add to this filter whichever ores we want to sift. But from here, we have to once again split this. So we're getting regular dusts as a chance output. In this case, sulfur, which is actually decent. We need some sulfur. And also purified. So the purified we have to centrifuge. We can smelt it, but we get a chance output at the centrifuge step. So we may as well just centrifuge this. And apparently at EV tier, the centrifuge changes name to a molecular separator. I don't remember it being like that in Omnifactory. But yeah, we'll put in the recipe for these and we'll build 4 just to begin with again. Alright, so those are crafting up. And these we were going to build in the middle. I think we'll leave 1, 2, 3 blocks and then we'll build them here. And the reason for that is I was thinking that we have our packagers here. So we're getting tiny dust from this chest. The packagers will be here. And the output from the sifter also gives us some purified. So if we look at purified diamonds, which is something that's going to go through these sifting machines, there's a chance at a purified pile of diamond dust, which we'll also want to centrifuge. So at some point, some of the items from both of these lines will once again combine. So to filter this step for the separators, we will once again put 2 more chests down here. These are GregTech chests, and I guess we'll do the same on this side. So for these pulverizers, we will do 1 filter for dust pure, and the second filter is just going to be dust regular. Actually no, it looks like we can't do dust regular. I think dust regular is a feature added in Omnifactory specifically. I think the version of GregTech in this pack is too old for dust regular. So unfortunately we don't get the dust regular filter for the regular dust that aren't purified. So to fix that, I think we can actually just do... Is a blacklist going to work if we do dust purified wildstar and blacklist that? Yeah, that seems to work. As long as there's no odd items that come out of this purified version of the ores, we should be fine for the purifieds to all end up in here and all the regulars here. So all of these dusts are going to end up in our system. Or actually, we may end up storing all the output of this ore processing in their own barrels. I haven't quite decided yet, or maybe an ME subnet. That's something I'll have to think about. But the purifieds we want to be in here, so I'm going to set up the same filters on this one. Just in case you're following along, I think I said purified before, this should be dust pure blacklist. And same with these two, whitelist and blacklist in the top. This gives us more tiny dusts, which I think the packagers are going to be here. So actually, yeah, let me grab some packagers. Okay, so I placed our 2 packagers, and I've also hooked this up to the dust tiny that was from our ore washers. Those just get extracted on blue round robin. We have circuit 1 in here to turn the tiny piles into regular dusts. And then out of these separators, we get more tiny dusts, obviously, which have to go into these 2 chests. One of them is going to be for the tiny dusts. It doesn't actually matter which one. I guess we'll make this one for dust tiny. And then everything else is just going to go into this one where it will get sent into our main system. So now we can see just the regular dust gets sent in here. The tinies should be put in here any minute. Yep, and then we have to also connect these to the packagers. We can just go underneath. Don't want these to connect right here. Alright, so now we're getting all the output from the packagers in here, and actually there is one more step that I forgot, which is that we want to insert only 9 items into this packager at once. There we go, so I switched it round so that we are inserting into these stainless steel crates, and then we have robot arms on these with supply exact 9. And then the outputs get taken on light grey channel into this chest here. I think this is from when I was changing the conduits. It shouldn't put any tiny dust in here. Alright, so with that, I think we're basically done. There is still the sifting step to deal with, but we have to wait on some of the diamonds and emeralds making it through here. But all that's left to do now is to obviously clean this up. We're going to put conduit facades, and I tried to keep it nice and neat, or as neat as I could make it. So I'll have to make a bunch of facades and whatnot, but also upgrade the machines. Like, the ratios are not correct here. But hopefully it kind of made sense from what I was doing. It's a bit hard to build this and try to explain at the same time. But I think next time I'm going to try to refine this, and then I'll do a full explanation of all the processes for each ore. But I think this episode's getting a bit long, so we'll wrap up here for today. Yeah, now the sifters are working. So I got some emerald through here. So now we can see that there is purified emerald in here. This should go into these separators. And then this is what I was talking about with the flawless and exquisites. So these are chance outputs, and the chipped, there's like nothing left to do with these except pulverize these. The flawed, I think, is the same, but the flawless does have some uses, as well as the exquisite, and then obviously the regular gems. But yeah, we're going to leave it here, let this thing run a bit, and I'll probably hook it up to its own subnet for these outputs. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for some more FTB interactions.